We begin chapter 6. Chapter 6 begins a discussion, understanding of the human soul or the animal soul, and beginning with the phrase the Almighty created one thing, the opposite the other. In others, in holiness, whatever there is, there has to be on the other side also of klipa, siter acher, of the negativity of this world. There has to be an equilibrium. Ultimately, that gives us freedom of choice, of course. So just as the divine soul consists of 10 holy faculties, 3 intellectual and 7 emotional, likewise, this soul that is of siter acher, which derives from klipas noiga, klipa, shell, noiga, translucent, meaning there's some good. It's a mixture of good and bad. This soul is it's not all bad. There's good and bad in it. Mostly negative, as we'll learn. But there's some good there too, right? Where is it clothed? As opposed to the divine soul, it's enclosed in the mind and the brain. This soul of siter acher, of klipa, it is enclosed in the blood of the individual, and therefore it animates the body. This soul animates the body. The 10, we don't call them spheres, right, of the animal soul. Spheres is the term that we call above the 10 divine attributes of God that now is breathed in, and now there's 10 holy faculties of the divine soul. But this also has 10, but it's not blown into, it's not holy, and it's called crowns of impurity. What does it mean, crowns of impurity? Meaning, if you got 10 kings in a room, each one is vying to be, on top of the other, to defeat the other, to be better than the other, right? 10 kings in a room. They don't make space for the other because each one feels their greatness. So likewise over here, each of the 10 powers of the animal soul feel their greatness, and they're not inclusionary as in holiness. Holiness, inclusion. This is not, right? So the 10 evil midas of 7 emotional traits that are negative. Lust is the equivalent of kipla of chesed, of kindness, right? Kindness of the godly soul is to give. Of the animal soul is also giving to your lust, right? Anger is an expression of the midah of gvura, of severity. Boastfulness is the equivalent to tiferes, beauty, right? Boastful about yourself, beautifying yourself, right? And all of this stems from the 4 evil elements that we spoke about in chapter 1 briefly, right? Air, boastfulness; fire, anger; water, lust; and earth is heaviness of slothfulness, laziness. Right? And, of course, besides the emotions, there's also the intelligence that gives birth to these 7 negative emotions. And they're subdivided into Chachma, Bina, V'das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And of course, the intellect that we describe over here is greater the intellect, the greater will be the emotional capacity of the individual. So small intellect, so therefore you're going to be self-directed and self-absorbed with a literal candy. Then you become older, you're still self-absorbed with your animal soul, it's just a bigger candy. So now it's, a car instead, right? So that's the idea of a child desires and loves, things that are petty, because the intellect is immature. So the intellect becomes greater, so you appreciate greater, better things. But again, what you're appreciating is all things of klipa, not God. That's not coming from the animal soul. The animal soul on its own is not seeking God on its own, right? On its own, at least. Um, so just as the intelligence is, um, minimal, so therefore you're going to get angry at minimal things, right? You won't sweat the small stuff because your intelligence is lacking. Trivial things, you get angry and you'll be boastful about whatever, right? So, when a person thinks or talks or acts based on the animal soul, right? These are all then impure garments of the soul, right? Garments of the self-expression of the soul, right? So what kind of things are impure? So says the Alter Rebbe. So you might think, oh, evil things. No. Not like, oh, you're thinking about, that person who hurt your feelings and you're having nasty thoughts about them, right? Or speaking about that person who's, so that comes from klipa. Those are all negative things, right? No, actually, all the deeds and all the thoughts that are under the sun, all mundane activity, vanity of affliction of the spirit, all of those things that are not directed to God and what He needs from us, they stem from this soul of klipa. Holiness is nothing but a dwelling of the extension of God's holiness, where we surrender ourselves to God. What He needs from me, and that's what I do, that's an expression of the divine soul. If it's not that, so I'm doing, and it could be a good thing. It's not a bad thing that you're doing when it can be motivated by the animal soul, but it's not a surrender to God, which the ultimate surrender to God is, martyrdom of sanctifying God's name. Something we'll learn more about afterwards, right? So that's why our sages say that even if an individual sits and is engaged in Torah study, the divine presence rests upon the individual, right? And that's why we're a minyan, where you have 10, that the Shekhinah, the divine presence, is there, because there is a submission, a surrender to the divine, in doing that which we're needed for. We do that, and as a result, God dwells in that which we surrender. That's the beginning of chapter 6. We're going to learn more about that in the forthcoming classes. Unfortunately, I can't have any discussion right now because I have other responsibilities, but we will continue. There'll be TRC tonight, and there could be also the Parsha class. I'm not certain yet of the schedule. I'll keep you posted. Okay. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you for Chabad Zich and Kadesh in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share it with you, the Tanya. Have an amazing, wonderful day. And last light of Hanukkah tonight. Be well.